I can't believe 2020 is gone. It's been the craziest year ever in my life, but it just went by in a flash. It seems like the older I get, the faster time goes by. When I was young, it seemed like it took forever for a year to go by. Now, before I know it, it'll be this time next year and I'll be talking about that I can't believe 2021 is gone. That's just how fast time seems to fly. The older I get, the faster it goes. This time of the year, a lot of people start thinking about the new year and all the big plans they have, and maybe things they want to do differently, or things they want to do the same, or things they want to change, like New Year's resolutions. And New Year's has a lot of traditions in Appalachia. Of course, there's the traditional kiss at midnight. That's just pretty much everywhere. Of course, not just in Appalachia, but people in Appalachia definitely observe that. I've been at parties in the past, or dances or things, where at midnight you can see all the couples, kiss at the stroke of midnight. So that's a common one here, just like it is everywhere else. In Appalachia, churches have what they call a watch service. When I was young, and I would hear about them when I was just a kid, I thought, oh, well, it's a watch service, so all the redeemed are gathered together, so just in case the new year doesn't ring in, like they were all prepared to go home to glory. But that really isn't what they're about. A watch service is actually just a time of thankfulness, to thank God for the blessings they've enjoyed during the year, and then also a time to pray for the coming year, so that God's blessings will continue to be bestowed upon them. I don't really ever remember going to a watch service, though, even though they're very common in our area, and we certainly went to church a lot. I think Pap just thought any kind of praying or thankfulness could be done before bedtime. When the girls were in middle school and maybe in their early high school years, New Year's Eve would find us at the John C. Campbell Folk School. They always had a dance. Of course, they're not going to have one this year because of COVID. But at that dance, that was the way we would ring in the new year. And Corey and Katie always begged to go, and that was before they could drive. So, of course, I had to go along with them, and it was fun. The folk school had different little things that went on that night, from the follies, where people kind of did little skits and plays. So they usually had some music. They had dancing by the dance teams. And then, of course, there was the large contra dance. But another interesting thing they did at midnight is that they shot a pair of boxer shorts out of a cannon. I never did find out exactly what the story behind that is. I need to find out, but I didn't. But that was a unique thing that I got to witness that John C. Campbell Folk School would do on New Year's Eve. One of the most interesting things, and I never got to witness it, and I still mourn the fact that I didn't, but my friend Tracy grew up here just over the ridge in Pine Log. We grew up together, and she lives in Montana now, but as a child and growing up, her family on New Year's Eve would always gather together, and of course they would have food and all that kind of stuff, but they would do what was called fireballing. So I'd read about fireballing in books. I actually probably read about it after. I didn't know I just thought Tracy's family was kind of strange for what they did, but then later I found out, oh no, that's a real thing that people used to do a lot, and it's just totally fell out of fashion. But so fireballing, in the weeks leading up to New Year's Eve, they would sew together balls of fabric, make them into balls, and then they would soak them in a flammable liquid, probably kerosene, but I don't know for sure. And then on that night, when you're gathered together and everybody's eating and drinking and making merry for the New Year's, they would light them on fire, and then, I don't know, I guess they had some kind of contraption or whatever, and they would throw them or roll them across the field. I just can't imagine. That must have been a lot of fun. I know it was, because they did it every year. They don't do it now, or I'd make sure that I could attend one. But when I was growing up, it just never worked out to where I was able to go, and I mourn that fact. But fireballing, so that was like a traditional thing in Appalachia in days gone by that a lot of people did, but Tracy's family is the only family that I know of that did it in my lifetime. Another interesting tradition or piece of folklore from Appalachia about New Year's is the first footer. So the first footer means that if the first person who sets foot in your house after the New Year on New Year's Day is a tall, dark-haired man, then you're bound to have good luck for the rest of the year. So, I don't know, it's interesting to think about how that one come about, and it also seems to me like you could really orchestrate that to make sure that happened every year, and maybe some people do, I don't know. Reminds me, though, that one year we had a really exciting New Year's Day. I really don't remember it, to be honest, but I'm sure I was excited. But Paul was born on New Year's Day. So I've heard the story over and over from Granny through the years. Paul was her and Pat's last child, so she'd already been through that twice before, so she knew, what was coming about labor and all that kind of stuff. And she just knew when she went into labor on New Year's Eve that she was going to give birth to the first child born in Cherokee County in the new year, the first day. I don't know if your paper does that, but our local paper usually usually will show the first baby born of the new year, you know, and usually have a little tidbit about its family or its mother at least. And Granny just knew her and Paul were going to end up in the Scout that year. But right before Paul was born, just minutes before basically, someone else come in, another lady in labor, and she just really quickly, where Granny had been in labor, she just spit her baby out, and there you go. Paul was second born in Cherokee County that year. But that's just a funny story I've heard Granny tell about over the years. Another really common tradition in Appalachia and throughout all the South really is that it's on New Year's Day you eat black-eyed peas, hog jows, and greens, some type of greens. And if you do, that will make you healthy, wealthy, and wise. So a lot of people really, that's their meal on New Year's Day. It's funny, I didn't know that. Probably after I started the Blind Pig and the Acorn and I was researching something, I come across that. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Granny likes all that stuff, but we never had that meal. So it's funny, I asked Granny and Pap, I said, did you know that if you eat black-eyed peas and greens and hog jows on New Year's Day, you're supposed to be healthy, wealthy, and wise? Have you ever heard that? You know, I wanted to see if their families maybe did it while they were growing up, and maybe for some reason we just didn't. But it was so funny. Granny said, well, no wonder we've always been poor, because she'd never heard it either, and obviously she'd never observed it. But a lot of people do that. As you might imagine, I've wrote about New Year's traditions on the Blind Pig and the Acorn quite a bit over the years. I thought it'd be neat to share some of the New Year's traditions that my readers have shared with me over the years with you. So from North Carolina Mountain Woman, this is what she said. I remember following the shooters and greeters in Cherryville around to welcome the new year. They chant outside the door, and the chant is very long, she says, but here's the older, shorter version. Here we stand before your door, as we stood the year before. Give us whiskey, give us gin, open the door and let us in. And she says that supposedly that tradition of going around and chanting at people's doors dates back to like 1300, so a long time ago. Wow. So Bob said, in my younger years, an old flame, she was a country gal, used to say, whatever you're doing at midnight on New Year's Eve is what you'll be doing all year long. I've heard that one too a lot. I've also heard like there's some like don't wash on New Year's Day or you'll be washing all year long, those kind of things. From Jim Cassida, he said anvil jumping, using gunpowder to shoot an anvil skyward. I've heard of that one. Firing black powder guns into the air. That's common here for people to do. Shoot guns at midnight. In Appalachia, throughout Appalachia it's common. Shoot guns or firecrackers or both. Turning the Yule log, Jim says, which was supposed to last until the celebration of Old Christmas. Janet Smart said, we have the tradition here in West Virginia of eating cabbage on New Year's Day. The stores always have an abundance of it and usually put it on sale. Mom would put silver, such as a silver dime, in the bowl of cabbage. The person who scooped out the dime with their cabbage would be prosperous in the coming new year. Grandma always made sure the first one to set foot in her house on New Year's was a male, and I always attended watch services at church where I was growing up. So that one's interesting because you can see she was familiar with the first footer just like I was. She's West Virginia and I'm in Western North Carolina, and then also the watch services. Ethelene Dyer Jones said, we had a belief on the farm about New Year's Day. The first visitor to your door on New Year's Day determined the sex of all offspring for the coming year associated with that household. If a man or boy, then all the calves, pigs, puppies, kittens born would be male. Likewise, they would be female if your first visitor were a woman or a girl. That held true of any baby born to the family. I really didn't follow through to see if this old belief held or not. So far as the New Year's meal, we followed to a T the black-eyed peas and greens, but sometimes substituted other pork like baked ham for the hog jowl, which was terribly fat and not so tasty. I hope you enjoyed hearing about some of Appalachia's New Year's traditions, and I hope you'll leave a comment and share any traditions that you observe or that your family are familiar with. Mostly, I just hope you'll drop back by often as I celebrate Appalachia.